Okay, hi, it's Rory Winters here from Edge of the Box Mentoring, speaking with a former teammate of mine, Barry Roche, who also acts as a bit of a mentor for me when I was coming through the ranks and didn't quite make it at Morecambe. Hi, Barry, nice to see you. First question, going back a long time now. When you moved over from Ireland to Nottingham Forest as a youth team player, any challenges that you particularly remember facing on that journey?
At the start, no, because when I moved over at 16, I moved over. Nottingham Forest had a big Irish community in the club, and I remember there being maybe 7 or 8 of us on the plane over at the same time. So at the start, it was like, it was excitement. It was effectively moving over with your mates. But sort of as the weeks gone on and you got to grips with what you were expected to do in a day in, day out, you found yourself having, as all professional footballers do, from 16 upwards, you have a lot of time on your hands. So homesickness definitely started to kick in then, and that was quite difficult because, like I said, at the start, it didn't feel like I was moving away from home, and that may sound strange, but it was just like, right, I'm going to play football. I'm going to play football with my mates. But as the time goes on, myself and quite a number, if not all, of the lads at the start suffer from homesickness, but that was in effect partly due to the amount of time we found on our hands.
Yeah. Did you find that you had anyone in particular at the club you could turn to help with that homesickness, or was it just the lads together helped each other out?
It was just the lads together at the start. Yeah, there was sort of education officers and welfare officers that you could go and speak to, but as a young lad, you might. Well, we certainly weren't particularly confident in going and speaking to others, so you sort of confided in who you knew and what you knew. And like I said, there was 8, 9 other Irish lads there, so excuse me, we'd get ourselves through it. Weekend times when we all lived in the same digs, so the English lads would go home for the weekend, and there'd be maybe 10 Irish lads in the digs together. So we effectively got ourselves through it. And some people could deal with it, some didn't. There was plenty of times when I found it hard, and I remember when I did actually confide in someone at the club. I was called into the manager's office, and he said, "Listen, you're going to go home for the weekend to deal with the homesickness." But it wasn't said in a way that, "Oh, listen, just this will go home and help you." It was like, "Right, well, bloody hell, your homesickness, right? Well, why don't you go home for a weekend?" We were made feel guilty about struggling to that fact, and that's one thing sort of I remember and I really didn't like.
Yeah, I think that's where I'm hoping to bridge a gap with the mentoring, so it's almost an unbiased and a neutral sort of voice on that, because I know when I moved to digs myself personally, there's times where it can be difficult, but you don't want to turn to the club because it could affect your position at the club, right, as a player.
Well, exactly, yeah. And I'll be honest, the person I spoke to, and don't get me wrong, it got me a weekend at home, which was great, but the person I spoke to about being homesick, and I spoke to in confidence.
Yeah.
And all of a sudden, literally the next day, and don't get me wrong, I know he did it wanting to do the right things to help me out, but if I speak to someone in confidence, I expect it to stay that way.
Absolutely.
So if you are speaking to someone within the club, and they whatever the title is, welfare officer, something like that, they will care, but ultimately, are they going to have your best interests at heart or the club's best interests at heart? So I think it would be hard for a player to really open up to someone inside the club because you don't know what their agenda may be.
Yeah, absolutely. And then moving forwards from that, you turned professional at Nottingham Forest and carried on with it. You've had a great career ever since. Did you find any sort of difficulties in transition away from Nottingham Forest when you had to move? Any setbacks in your career as you went through, and how did you deal with those?
Well, yeah, I did, because I got released Forest when I was 23, and don't get me wrong, I knew I was getting released. I deserved to be released. I hadn't done enough to earn a contract. But when you've been that's the only place you've known, the only workplace you've known since you moved away from home, it was really, really difficult. And I went home, I got released, start of May. Like I said, even though I knew for months it was coming. And I went home for the summer and twiddling my thumbs basically because I had nothing sorted.
Yeah.
I remember I went back and played Gaelic football for for 5 or 6 weeks.
Yeah.
I had an agent who was supposed to be working for me. Later found out he wasn't, and everybody he told me that he'd spoken to was complete nonsense, because he told me Yeah, I spoke to Chesterfield. They don't need a goalkeeper. I made a phone call on my own, and 3 weeks later I signed for Chesterfield, who actually needed 2 goalkeepers. So it was a really difficult time, because you start panicking and thinking, well, what on earth am I going to do? Because I had nothing. I'd 23. I'd left school after the junior certificate, which is obviously the equivalent to the GCSEs over here. I had no education, nothing to fall back on. So it was a difficult time. Luckily, I went to Chesterfield, spent a couple of years there, and from there on to Morecambe.
Excellent. And I guess for me, in this that I'm doing, that uncertainty of a new contract is an area of concern for me for these footballers, because not everyone is going to be as talented as you, or as fortunate, or I guess would take it upon themselves to ring the club. That's quite a daunting process. So do you think you could have done anything more in that time at Forest when you might have known the end was nigh? Is there any educational, did you feel there was anything you could have done to prepare, or you just focus on football?
I was purely focused on football, but in hindsight, which obviously hindsight's a great thing, the amount of spare time footballers have on their hands is incredible. Obviously, you work a little bit longer when you're in the youth team, but as a pro, you graduate to the first team. You're done by 1 o'clock every day. Yeah. And I look back and the amount of time up until I was 26, when I did get my backside in gear, the amount of time you waste on used to go home and play the PlayStation for 4 hours with the lads. And while it was great fun, we had a great laugh. It's a complete waste of time, because at any instant in training in a game, your one bad tackle, one bad fall, your career could be over in a flash.
Yeah.
So for that to happen and not to have something to fall back on would be awful. So the PFA, who like we spoke off camera, I can't speak highly enough of. They do so many good courses, they have everything out there to help you. And I just think it's so important for players to plan for a career after football, because like I said, you never know when it's gonna be over.
Yeah. And I think that moves naturally on to the sort of next question. So you went and got a sports journalism degree. How did that kind of fit in with your identity as a footballer? So I think I was a teammate of yours when you were graduating around about then. How did that balance work for you? You still felt you could perform on a Saturday, but you're still completing your degree on the side? Were you a student? Were you a footballer? Where did you see yourself?
Oh, always a footballer, mate. That was my identity, and that had been, I suppose, drilled into you as soon as you come over to England or join the professional setup at 16. Everything is focused on you being a footballer. Yeah, we went to college on a Wednesday and maybe a Thursday afternoon, but there was no pressure put on you to get decent grades. It didn't matter. Everything was put on you performing as a footballer. And I think that's that is changing slightly. Certainly at the bigger clubs, they've got people employed to sort of, obviously certainly look after the educational side of things and make it a little bit more important that the players go through that system and trying to get something in behind them to deal with when they finish playing football. But ultimately, it is just football. And it's all the clubs are bothered about. They've got the things in place, but ultimately, all they care about is you being a footballer.
Yeah.
So you've got to, if you're going to do something like that, you've got to take it upon yourself to go out and the help is there. Don't get me wrong. If you want it and you go to the likes of PFA, but ultimately it's the player. It's down to the player to go and do his bit and get something on board.
And you'd be an advocate of combining the two, right? It's doable. You could do it. You're still a footballer, but you were getting your education, and it gives you a scope for the future. Would you say? Yeah,
absolutely. I'm definitely a big fan of that. And don't get me wrong. When we started the degree, it was a massive shock to the system. Bearing in mind, I think I started my degree when I was maybe 26. So I was 8 years out of any kind of education. And so I took on the sports journalism. I was always interested in journalism. I enjoyed being on the radio, doing pieces like that. I enjoyed the written press. But I'll be honest, the shock to the system was incredible. I remember going in our first day at Stafford University, and straight away no one had particularly prepared us for what was to come. We walked straight away into a 3-hour law lecture. And I was like, what the hell is this? It was incredible. I remember there was 14 of us from all different sports, majority football, but there was boxers in there, there was golfers taking on this degree. And out of the 14 that started, I think there was 4 or 5 who graduated, and there was 6 gone within the first sort of month.
Yeah,
people just couldn't cope with it. But having stuck with it, I'm delighted I did. Don't get me wrong, I've not exactly used my degree. I've chosen a different path, but I think it's imperative that people and players start to plan for a life after sport, because it's going to come sooner or later, and it depends whether you're lucky. I consider myself lucky that I've played so long, but other people aren't that lucky. So you've got to have something in place.
Absolutely. And then I think just to wrap up from there, any advice for younger players and as to how to sort of plan for those next steps? Because obviously, attrition rate, as we spoke about off camera, is high amongst footballers getting released between 18 and 24. A lot fall by the wayside. What would you sort of encourage these young players to be looking at, maybe doing? Would a mentor help? I don't know. What do you think?
I think a mentor definitely would help, because, like I said earlier, as much as the clubs have these people in place, I don't want to sound cynical, but these people are employed by the club.
Yeah.
So you're not necessarily sure. Yes, they will obviously care about you and they will do their job, but ultimately they are employed by the club. So I don't think they're necessarily going to push people and players to find something after football, because all the club's interested in really is the football side of things. And like I said, you have an enormous amount of spare time in your hands as a footballer. So to have someone impartial to speak to and to help out, and like you've been in the professional setup, you can relate to these players, and also you've gone on to do something else afterwards. You've carved a path for yourself by hard work, and to be able to speak to someone like that, I think would be very, very valuable.
Perfect. And then a little bit about yourself. What are the future plans? Recently retired, 20-year professional career. Where are you at now? What are you up to?
I'm just struggling to get up off the sofa at the minute, mate. I feel so old. No, I've retired. Well, retired at the end of once the season was cut short. I've taken up the goalkeeping coach role at Morecambe, but I always felt when I did my journalism degree, I always felt that once I finished football, that was me. I wanted to be out of it.
Yeah.
And I was convinced by that. But the longer I stayed in the game, I think I realised that it was too big a part of me. I've been in it too long to simply walk away. And that's when, I really started to think about the coaching side of things. So took my badges through the PFA. Like I said, got appointed the goalkeeping coach here in the summer, and I've recently opened up my own goalkeeping school up here, which has started really well, and it's really enjoyable.
Brilliant. So thank you very much, Barry. We'll leave you there to the rest of your day. But thanks for those words, and good luck with the coaching company.
Cheers, mate. Good to speak to you.
Bye bye.